So we're gonna get started with domain and range. Can somebody remind me what we look at on the graph for domain and range? Domain is the X and range is the Y. So for domain, we're going to look how far to the left and right the graph goes. For range, we're going to look at how far up and down the graph goes. And since we're looking at graphs, we're going to use a lot of Desmos today. So go ahead and get out your Chromebooks because we're definitely going to need those. And once you have your Chromebook out, you can just type in this first example and see what all the actual points look like. I know there's a picture of it in your notes, but we can see actual points pulled up. Mm-hmm. All right. How are we doing with getting it pulled up? Almost there? Okay. So the domain we can kind of see from the picture already. The range is the one that takes a little bit more effort on this one. So with the domain, if we're going from the left side of the graph to the right side of the graph, yeah, we're going to see negative infinity on the left side because we have a left arrow. And then what do we have for the right side? Positive infinity. So negative infinity on the left side for a left arrow, positive infinity on the right side for a right arrow. The graph goes left forever and right forever. And then the range is just a little bit more complicated, but not much. So we can see that it goes down forever, right? So how do we start the range? Negative infinity. But then when we look at the graph, we can see this graph does not go up forever, right? It stops, and it stops right here at this point. So this is why we pulled up the graph on Desmos. We have to see what that point is. Now, if we're looking at how far up it goes, are we going to look at the X or the Y coordinate? The Y coordinate. Okay, so I'm going to look at Desmos. I'm going to look at that Y coordinate and see what it is. So on Desmos, you can just click right on it. So the very top of the graph is 1.207. And so when I am writing the range of my function, I'm going to say the bottom of the graph is negative infinity. The top of the graph is 1.207. And I can actually get to the top. So what should I say? Parenthesis or bracket? It's a bracket. That's an actual point. You can get there. Okay. Now, would you guys like to move on to the next type of thing we're going to look at, or do you guys want to practice a few of those on a worksheet? Move on with the notes, practice. Some more notes? Okay. So the next part we're going to do is increasing and decreasing intervals. And does that use X coordinates or Y coordinates? It uses X coordinates, and it uses X coordinates for both of them. We're going to use X coordinates for both of them. Okay, so what we need to do here is we're going to type this equation into Desmos, and we're going to label the X coordinates for the important parts of the graph. So I'm going to go into Desmos and type this equation in. And for increasing and decreasing, the important parts of the graph are always when the stick figure switches from going uphill to going downhill, or switches from going downhill to going uphill. So if I look at my stick figure, I'm going to go back to my notes. If I start over here, I put my stick figure on the graph. And when my stick figure starts walking, is he walking uphill or downhill? He's walking uphill. So my stick figure starts off by increasing, and my stick figure is walking uphill all the way until he gets to this point. That's the top of the mountain, right? And then once he gets to the top of the mountain, he starts walking downhill. So now he's decreasing. And then the stick figure gets to the bottom of the valley. And then what happens after that? He's walking uphill again. So now we're increasing again. Okay. So I want to know what this X value is, and this X value, and this X value, and this X value. So this over here is not a specific X, it's an arrow. So negative infinity, because that's a left arrow. This X over here is not a specific X value, it's an arrow. So a right arrow is a positive infinity. Okay, and then we have these two X values here. This is the X value of the mountaintop, so the X value of the maximum. And this is the X value of the valley, which is going to be the X value of the minimum. So let's go ahead on Desmos. And we're going to do this point right here. So that X value is -4. And then that X value is a decimal. So I'm going to go ahead and label these in the picture. So I've got -4 and then -1.333. Okay. So I've got those labeled now. And since I wrote the word increasing twice, that means that for the first time, we've never experienced this before, I don't think. But for the first time, we have two increasing answers. So we're actually going to have to write both of them. So this word increasing is between the numbers negative infinity and -4. So I'm going to write negative infinity, comma, -4 for the first answer. And so the first one, we're going to do parenthesis. Now at the -4, when you're standing at the top of the mountain, are you actively walking uphill at the top of the mountain? No, you're not. So we're going to do a parenthesis there because that is not included in what it means to increase. Okay. And then over here, this increasing answer is between these two numbers. So I'm going to do -1.333, comma, infinity. That's what that was between. Infinity, we can never actually get there. So we're going to put a parenthesis on that one. Now, when you're at the very bottom of the valley and you're standing there, are you actively walking uphill at the very bottom of the valley? No, that's not what it means to increase. So we're going to do a parenthesis there. Okay. Now, whenever you have two different answers, if you guys wrote it like this, I'd give you full credit. This is totally fine. I'm not going to mark you down for this. But technically, if you have two different answers, you're supposed to put a U in between. You don't have to put that if you have X and Y coordinates, like if it's a point, if you're doing like two X intercepts and you say the first X intercept is 2 at 2, 0, and the second X intercept is 5 at 5, 0, and you put two of them next together. But if you're talking about intervals and you put two intervals together, you're supposed to put a U. And what a U means is that you have to have both answers at the same time to be correct. If you put one answer or the other answer, you're wrong. You have to have both. And then both of them at the same time make you correct. Again, like I said, I'm not going to mark you down if you forget to put the U. I just want you guys to not be confused if you see it. So you're going to see it on my answer keys, and then you just know like, oh, the U is supposed to be there. But if you don't put it, I'm fine with that. Okay. All right, now we've got to put the decreasing interval, and the word decreasing is between what numbers? Okay, -4, -1.333. Now, when you stand at the top of the mountain, are you actively walking downhill? When you stand at the bottom of the valley, are you actively walking downhill? No. So we're going to just parentheses on both of those. And one thing I've said about increasing and decreasing intervals is if you always want to put parentheses in there, you will always be marked correct. You don't ever have to worry about putting a bracket, even during the times when it's okay to put a bracket. So if you just always want to put parentheses and never worry about it, that's totally fine. Okay. The only time we really worry about you putting brackets and you have to be accurate when you put the brackets is for domain and range. That's the one time where we're really specific about that. Okay. So if you always want to put parentheses here, that's totally fine. All right. How do we feel about the notes we've taken so far? Can we do some more of these? Yeah, we could do some more of those. Let's go back to this one up here. And let's see if we can do the increasing and decreasing interval for this one. So we're going to have to type this one back into Desmos. And I'm going to draw a sketch off to the side since we already labeled the sketch that was there. So I'm going to plug in the previous example. Let's do negative, y equals negative x to the fourth plus 2x to the second plus 2x minus 2. Okay, so there's the graph. All right, so I'm going to draw a little sketch like this, and I'm going to draw it off to the side in my notes. I'm going to show you guys where I'm drawing it. I'm going to draw it over here. So the graph goes up like this. Looks something like that. Okay, so my stick figure starts right here. And he's walking uphill, so he's increasing, right? And this part does something weird, but does he start walking downhill? No. So he doesn't walk uphill as fast, but he is not walking downhill. So we're going to say this is increasing still, just increasing at different rates. So he's walking uphill, walking uphill, walking uphill. He gets to this mountaintop, which is a maximum. And then after he gets to the mountaintop, which is the maximum, what does he do after that? Then he goes downhill. So this is the decreasing. Okay. So we need to know what this x value is, what this x value is, and what this x value is. Okay. So what are the x values for the arrows? Yeah, negative infinity, positive infinity. And now let's go to Desmos and let's figure out what this x value is right here. So that one, 1.191. So when we had found the decimal from before, we had found the y coordinate because we were finding the range. So this time we had to go back and find the x coordinate. So 1.191. Okay, so what answer are we going to put for increasing? So we're just going to write the word increasing is in between these two numbers. So negative infinity, 1.191. And then what do we put on either side? Parentheses. Okay. And then for decreasing, what do we put? Yep, 1.191. positive infinity. And then what do we put on either side? Parentheses. Yep. So for some of the different units we've found that for maximums and minimums, we could not find them. There just weren't any maximums or minimums for the graph. And I always said that maximums looked like mountaintops, minimums looked like valleys. And I said that in graphs, there could be more than one. For all of the functions we had studied before, there wasn't more than one. There was just one answer for those. We've finally hit the unit where there is typically a maximum and a minimum, at least one or the other. And there are problems where there is more than one maximum. It is possible to have more than one maximum. It is possible to have more than one minimum. So I'm going to draw a little picture here on your page. So we could have something that looks like this. And if they had a picture that looked like this would be a maximum, a maximum, a maximum, because these are all mountaintops. So it would be possible for us to have a graph that looked like that and have 3 maximums for one graph. And then it would be possible for this same graph to have 2 minimums because this same graph has 2 valleys. So these graphs that are called polynomial functions, they go up and down and they have these kind of smooth curves. That's possible for them to do that. And then it's possible for them to do things where they kind of go like this. And then that's no max or min. So you can see that there's a curve to it, but it's not a mountaintop or a valley. You'll see pieces like that too. So just remember, a maximum looks like a mountaintop, a minimum looks like a valley. That's specifically what you're looking for when you find them. And the nice thing is when you graph these on Desmos, Desmos will always put a little gray point when you graph it at where a maximum or a minimum is. It also does that for the X and the Y intercept. So when you look, like here's a maximum, here's a y-intercept. That's the only reason there's a gray point there is because it's the y-intercept. There is not a gray point there because the graph kind of curves right there. It's because it crosses the y-axis. There's gray points here because we have x-intercepts there. So the graph will always tell you where the maximums and minimums are on Desmos. It makes it easier for you guys to find those. Okay, so let's look at some of these on the notes. If you flip the page over. So we've got a picture here. Can somebody tell me how many answers we're going to get for maximum? We're going to get 3 answers total. And how many maximums? 1 max. We have 1 mountaintop. And then how many valleys do we have? We have 2 valleys, so we're going to get 2 minimums. Okay, so let's type this into Desmos, and we'll see what the actual points are. So x to the 4th minus x to the 3rd minus 4x squared plus 5. Okay, and now right here, I can't see everything I need to see. If you ever want to go back to the normal screen on Desmos, you can click the home button and it goes back to normal. And then you can also zoom in and zoom out with your fingers, which I think we all know. Okay, so here's our maximum, and you can see it's the y-intercept, but it's also a maximum. So it's got the gray point there. And then here's a minimum. You can see that with a gray point. And then here's the other minimum. We can see that with a gray point. So I'm just going to write all of those down. Maximum and negative 1.088, comma 2.954. There's 1 minimum. And I'll show you guys how I wrote them. So I did not put a U in between because these are just points. So I don't need a U because it's not two different intervals. It's just points. You can put a comma in between. You could put an and sign in between, but you don't need a U. If you put a U, I won't mark you down. I'll just put a slash through it. It's not correct to put that notation here. But I won't mark you down.